Millions felt sick to their stomachs watching a harrowing Coronation Street scene where fan favorite David Platt was raped. But for 23-year-old DJ Sam Thompson, the storyline was personal, as he was raped by two men on a night out in Manchester 2 years ago. The traumatic event left him unable to leave his parents' house for weeks, and he only recently has worked his way back. He drew on his experience to advise the show's writers on the scene where Platt is drugged and raped by his new friend Josh Tucker. And the aftermath. Scroll down for video. Mr. Thompson didn't initially realize what was happening to him when he woke up in a hotel room. And it was only when the physical pain kicked in that the horror of the situation hit him. I didn't know if it was a dream or a nightmare. I only remember snippets of it, and my memory of the whole ordeal is hazy, he said. It was the way I was in pain that was the biggest indication. When it was over, I got up and left and started walking home to my flat where my girlfriend and friend were waiting for me. When I got back to the flat, I just burst out crying. Mr. Thompson, then 22, had lived in Manchester just a few weeks when his horrific ordeal unfolded in September 2016. He had moved to the city from Newark, Nottinghamshire, with his then-girlfriend to pursue his dream of becoming a professional DJ, keen to check out the city's nightlife. Sam and his best friend Brady ventured into the city centre and spent the evening exploring different pubs and clubs. They lost each other in a haze of vodka shots, and Mr. Thompson, who had also lost his mobile phone, started chatting to a group of people outside a club. Before long, people started to leave. Mr. Thompson was left alone with just two men who persuaded him to stay for one last drink. We were all drinking and it's a really hazy memory. I think I was having a good laugh. The group fizzled down to just two people and me, he said. My memory is hazy, but the next thing I remember is one of them pulling off my trousers. What followed was an ordeal which lasted hours, in which Mr. Thompson says the two men took it in turns to rape him. At the time, Mr. Thompson could not explain why he didn't fight back. He froze. A therapist has since told him that people respond to trauma in different ways, and the fight, flight or freeze response kicks in. He remembers leaving the hotel at around 8 a.m. After the men had finished. He walked out onto the street with no understanding of where he was in his new city. After finding his bearings, he staggered towards his home in a daze. At that point, Mr. Thompson was unable to comprehend the enormity of what had just happened. It was weird, difficult to describe. I was in shock and I don't think it had really hit me. It sounds strange, but I went into Morrison's and bought a drink, he said. It was only when I got near home that it all hit me and the panic and frustration kicked in. I had feelings of not wanting to live with this. When he got back to his flat, he found his girlfriend and best mate Brady waiting for him, worried about where he had been. At that point, he just came out with it and told them the unthinkable: he'd been raped. I just burst into tears. They didn't know how to react. Brady put his arm around me and my girlfriend just broke down in tears, he said. I hadn't expected this to happen. I just wanted to have a shower, but they told me to go to the police. My girlfriend went to call my mum and I asked her to tell her because I couldn't bear to tell my mum what had happened. She put my mum on loudspeaker and she was the voice of reason. She said, "You need to report it." Now, the three friends made their way to the nearest police station, where Mr. Thompson said the wait to make his official statement felt like an eternity. Injuries to his arms were photographed and he was asked to give details of what he could remember to a specially trained officer. He said he was also asked questions about his morality and if the complaint was genuine. It wasn't an easy experience. I was talking to a woman I had not met. I think I would have found it easier to talk to a man, to be honest, he said. I had not slept at all. It was like I was being questioned for a crime. I had never heard of this happening to a straight man. I felt like they didn't believe me. It created so much more stress. I felt like they were saying I must be gay and making it up because I was keeping being gay secret. Mr. Thompson now realizes that the questions he was asked were necessary for the police investigation, but he found it a harrowing experience. He was taken home by a police officer and told not to shower or change his clothes until his appointment at the Wall Assault Referral Center at 10 p.m. that night. Exhausted after his ordeal, he managed to sleep only briefly before the forensic examination, where he was internally examined, given blood tests and advice on Wally-transmitted diseases. I still smelt of these two people. I just wanted to shower. It was a horrible experience, but I can't fault the people who took the samples, he said. It was not a nice ordeal to go through, and being given things like HIV advice is horrible, but at that point I had already made a report. I don't like to say to other people in my situation, you must report it to the police. In an ideal situation we would all go and report straight away. If you have got it in you, go and do it, and they will get the evidence they need should it go to court. But I know speaking to the police can be an extra ordeal. Desperate to leave Manchester, Mr Thompson was driven home that night to Newark, where he spent the next month dazed in front of the TV. That first weekend it was horrible for me and for my family and anyone else around me, he says. I couldn't be left alone in the house because I would cry and scream. I just couldn't be left on my own. I couldn't walk more than 2 or 3 meters from the house to smoke. I was a completely different person. My mum said you could see it was you, but there was no one behind the eyes. I spent a month sat in front of the television. I couldn't sleep, and if I did sleep I would have night terrors. There was a moment when I lost control and chucked tables and chairs around, so I agreed to go to the GP. I was given antidepressants and I refused to take them, so I chucked them in the bin. The diazepam and sleeping tablets I took to help me sleep. It took several weeks before Mr. Thompson felt strong enough to DJ at a local event, which he attended with his brother. That was the turning point he needed, and from that moment on he knew he could not let the attack ruin his life. I decided I was not going to let it beat me. My attitude was that I was not going to let them win. With me sat in the house doing nothing else, they were continually beating me, he said. Now I've had therapy, I know it's about control and power. When you've been raped, someone has taken away your power and control. Mr. Thompson returned to Manchester, started DJing again, got a job as a recruitment consultant, and made himself so busy I didn't have to think about it. Experts say that male rape and well assault is massively underreported in the UK. Around 75,000 men in England and Wales are estimated to be victims of well assault or attempted assault each year. According to the latest government statistics, of those, 9,000 are estimated to be victims of rape or attempted rape. But only around 1,550 males reported those crimes to the police in the year the data was collected. But avoiding the issue just made the problem worse, and his relationship became a casualty of what happened to him. Having lost interest in and finding it difficult even to kiss another person, his relationship ended in January 2017. Not long after, police told him the case against 2 men arrested in connection with his rape had been dropped because it would be difficult to prove he didn't consent. Initially it was a major knockback. I was adamant the police didn't believe me, and that was the problem, he said. But in June last year I met with the officer who handled my case, and I realized that was not true. Shortly afterwards, however, Mr. Thompson suffered a breakdown and was advised by the specialist officer who had handled his case to contact Survivors Manchester. The organization works exclusively with male victims of rape and well abuse, supporting them through counseling and peer-to-peer support. After admitting he needed help, Mr. Thompson had counseling and has since become a Survivors Ambassador. He is now keen to make sure that other men in the same situation know they are not alone, something Mr. Thompson didn't realize after his own attack. Coronation Street has a massive voice and people have a connection to David Platt. The storyline breaks down myths about male rape and explores what happens afterwards. He said, rape is nothing to do with consent. Because of the act of rape there's a lot of confusion and people don't understand what it is and that it can happen to anyone. Some men get an erection or can ejaculate while being raped, but it's not a pleasure thing. They're not enjoying it. It's just that certain glands are being touched that can be very difficult for someone to understand. What happened to me even made me question my morality. I have always been straight, but the way the police questioned me made me feel like I had to question myself. Mr. Thompson says therapy sessions and his work with survivors helped him to understand his experience properly. His story is now used by the charity to help train Greater Manchester police officers on how to deal with victims. Mr. Thompson refused to let the experience shape his life. He now lives back in Newark, still DJs, and is studying for exams in the hope of going to university in September to study law. The best advice is to try and remember you are not alone with this, he said. It's about talking. If you talk to friends, family, professionals, police, anyone, it helps. And if you can't say the words, then write them down or put them in a text. The moment you stop trying to keep it in is when you stop feeling alone. It helps you accept this has happened. It's not the end of your life. There was a point last year when I wanted to turn it around. I couldn't really care that much about how people see me. The big thing for me was how I felt and not realizing it happened to other men. If I could help other people to find their voice, I could help. Detective Inspector Zed Ali of Greater Manchester Police said, "I can't commend Mr. Thompson enough for his immense fortitude in raising awareness of this horrendous crime and also highlighting the importance of seeking specialist support. I would urge everyone to keep safe by remaining with friends when on a night out and ensure you and your friends return home safely together. Don't accept a drink from a stranger and do keep an eye on your own drink to ensure it has not been tampered with."
Where the freaks at?